Hi everyone, it's Chris here and welcome to another video. I thought I'd share some of the stuff that I picked up over the last month or so. I went to Bristol Record Fair last weekend actually, and that was pretty good. I met someone who subscribes to this channel. She didn't tell me her name, but she came over to say hello. So if you're watching, hello, it's nice to see you and thank you for making contact during that day. So this Bristol Record Fair is the Beacon Centre, 4 floors of vinyl, and really, really good. So I've got some stuff to share with you. The first one is this. This is the Pat Metheny group on ECM from '84, I think. Long-standing lineup of the Pat Metheny group. Lots of variety, inevitably, as you always get with Pat Metheny. After a fairly odd start, it settles into a really enjoyable album, actually. There's some Brazilian kind of elements to this. It's always quite, as you can imagine with Pat Metheny and ECM, quite sophisticated. It's quite gentle in places. Sometimes even slightly rocky, possibly. The title track, First Circle, which is about 9 minutes long, actually, 9 minutes 10, is really, really good. So that was a nice pickup. And all of these albums were £4, the ones that I'm showing you now. Second was this. This is probably the only album by Carlos Santana to involve Carlos Santana that I don't have up to a certain point, up to about 1980. So it's nice to add this one to the collection. It's the third duet album, and it sees him paired up with Alice Coltrane, who was John Coltrane's widow. She's a harpist, and obviously brings a very, very different sound to this particular album. There's lots of strings on here. It's quite meditational. It's quite mesmerizing in places. It's clearly very, very religiously influenced as well, so that can make it quite mysterious in places, actually. It's quite an interesting listen. It was the first album, I think, to involve Carlos Santana and not to go gold, which I'm kind of not surprised, really, because it's a bit weird. It's quite an acquired taste, really. But if I'm in the mood, I quite enjoy it, actually. So it was a nice addition to the collection. I think what you probably got to do is, whack the joss sticks on and assume the lotus position and say Om a lot, and it probably makes sense. But it's got Jacques DeJohnette on it, so that adds a little bit of jazz clout. But as I said, a really, really nice album, actually. So good addition to the collection. Next up is an album that I've got the first one that came out in this, not series, but you've probably know of Jazz Samba, which has Charlie Bird with Stan Getz. This is Jazz Samba Encore. It's on Verve Records. It's from, not sure, probably about 1965 or so. This features a number of decent players, actually, including Antonio Carlos Jobim. So it has that kind of real Brazilian sound to it. So Stan Getz, saxophonist, got a really good Brazilian backing band. Sounds like a lot of the stuff coming out of Brazil probably at that time. I quite like a little bossa nova, actually. I like the groove to it, actually, and there's some lovely guitar moments on here too. So it's a really interesting album. It's quite cool, quite a sexy album, actually. It's good. Next up is Games Guitars Play by Harvey Mandel. So this is the guitarist from Canned Heat. This is, I think, his third album, actually, third or fourth album from 1970. Up until this point, his albums had been instrumental, and I think in some kind of vain attempt to make himself a little bit more commercial, he's started to include some vocals in here, and the vocalist is a guy called Russell Dashiell, who also plays organ and guitar on here, and piano. He's all right as a guitarist, it's okay. It's probably moves away from that really good instrumental sound that he had to more kind of white blues rock, really. So it's all right. I was a little bit disappointed in it, if I'm really honest. It's not up to his previous albums, but for £4 you can't really go wrong. He certainly shows his real guitar credentials on that album, and there's a couple of quite nice moments. There's an instrumental, no, is it? I think it's instrumental version of Horace Silver's Senor Blues on it. So mediocre songs, really, but salvaged by some great guitar. Next up is an album I've seen numerous times. I've never picked it up, and I should, because it has a slight Deep Purple connection, and they're my favourite kind of band. So this is on CBS from 1969, actually. This is It's a Beautiful Day, their debut album. So late 60s San Francisco band. It features probably one of my least favourite instruments, the flute. It's got even got some harpsichord on it as well. So it's certainly an interesting album. It has quite intricate melodies. There's some really, really good playing. It's quite ethereal in places. It's quite heavy in others, or heavy-ish. There's one track on it, open side 2, it's called Bombay Calling. And if you listen to that and then you listen to Child in Time by Deep Purple, you can see why Deep Purple would have got their influence. It's a lovely timepiece, this album, actually, and a really enjoyable listen. And it shows just probably how sophisticated San Francisco music was at this point in time. So nice addition to the kind of collection of bands from that era. Next up is an album on Portrait Records, which is part of Epic. This is the guitarist from Boston, Barry Goodrow. This came out in 1980. It's basically Boston alumni album, really. It's Boston light, basic Boston, really. The guitarist obviously is the same guy from Boston, so it has that kind of sound. The lead singer, though, is not Brad Delp, although he does sing on a couple of songs on here, actually. It's something, is it Fran Cosmo or something? But quite English sounding, actually. But Brad Delp does sing on here. He does sing on a track called Dreams, which I think was a single, actually. It's a bit more rock and roll than Boston, actually, a bit less polished. It kind of lacks Tom Scholz's real attention to detail that he brought to Boston. And certainly for Boston fans in 1980, it would have filled a gap between Don't Look Back, which was their second album, and waiting for their third album, really, which I think came out in the mid-80s, actually, in the end. So not bad album. This is another £4 album. This is these are all £4. This is Roy Buchanan from '86, I think it is. It's on Sonnet Records in the States. That's Alligator, I think. This is Hot Wires, so it's quite 80s sounding. I think he was a magnificent guitar player. Real fluid guitar on here, searing runs. It's sometimes quite an uncomfortable guitar tone, actually. It's quite high pitched at times, but he's got a really smart band behind him. Country Boogie is really good fun. It's a really nice album, actually. He looks a bit like a bank manager, doesn't he? But boy, can he play the guitar. Fantastic stuff. Next up is an album that was in the £4 bin at Bristol Record Fair, so I snapped it up because I found it quite an interesting cover. And it's Rhinoceros, so I was a bit disappointed when I played it, actually, because it's nothing like the cover looks like. It's kind of like a semi supergroup, really. So there's members on here that were in Iron Butterfly, I think possibly Frank Zappa as well, Buffalo Springfield, but it's basically white blues rock, really. That's all that's on show here. The cover is quite misleading. I thought it might be a bit more psychedelic than it is. It's from 1969, 1970, so it's fairly basic blues rock. It's got quite nice sort of soul-drenched vocals to it, actually, and some reasonably good Hammond organ here and there, and the guitar is okay. So it's not a bad album, actually, and as I said, for £4 you can't really go wrong. There's a track on here, it's an instrumental track, which is probably the best track, actually, but it's only just short of 2 minutes. It's called Apricot Brandy, and it sounded a bit familiar, but I think they should have pursued that avenue a little bit more, actually. But anyway, there you go. That's Rhinoceros. I don't know if that's their debut or not, really. So there's the albums, a couple of 45s, 6 or 7 45s to share with you. I didn't buy these at Bristol Record Fair, these were bought elsewhere, but the first one is this one, Pointed Sticks. This is Out of Luck. It's on Stiff Records, actually, and I've looked for this for a while. It's quite collectible. It's kind of, I think it's like I think they're an American band, actually. It's kind of power pop. It's all right, actually. It's very new wavy, but I do like to pick up Stiff singles if they look interesting, and I've been looking out for that one, and that was £1, so and it's quite collectible, so I was pleased to pick that up. Also picked up a couple of, again, these were really cheap, actually, a couple of early Iron Maiden singles. So this is Sanctuary, back with Drifter, and I Got the Fire, which is a Montrose song, and Women in Uniform, which is a Skyhook song, back with Invasion. And so that was nice. Unfortunately, this one is the censored cover, right? And there is a cover that came out before without the black bit over Margaret Thatcher's face, which is quite collectible, but I don't think this one is. But it was nice to pick those two up. Found this one in a charity shop. This is The Cure, Love Song from probably, when's this? 89. I thought it was earlier than that actually. Love Song by The Cure. And a 1979 reissue of a 77 song by Sham 69 called I Don't Wanna. It's also got Red London and Ulster on the B-side, so that was a nice little find. And I live in Somerset, so this band are famous in this area, probably not famous anywhere else, but Scrumpy and Western EP by Adge Cutler and the Wurzels. You have to be from the West Country, I think, in the UK to really understand this band. But, you know, side two, which has got Drink Up Thy Cider and Arcady Jacko. So if you're from Somerset or you're from the West Country, you'd get them. And the last one is a South African Deep Purple single, Smoke on the Water, back with Smoke on the Water. Talking to Deep Purple, got a few CDs to share with you. I don't usually buy CDs actually, but I bought a stack recently because there's been some cheap ones that I've wanted to have to add to my collection. The CDs behind you here, that are behind me that you can see, are all Deep Purple and related. So the kind of Deep Purple family tree, and I've just added these in really. So the first one up is this one. This is Phoenix Rising by Deep Purple. This has got tracks from the Mark IV version of Deep Purple. That was the version with Tommy Bolin. It's got a DVD with it as well, 30 minutes concert from Japan, an 80-minute documentary and a few extras like interviews and stuff. It shows Tommy Bolin is slightly is better. He was kind of, you know, he had real troubles with drugs during his time with Deep Purple, and some of his performances were really poor. And Last Concert in Japan, which it came out in about 1977, was really disappointing. And but he can really play, and the beauty of Tommy Bolin, he can play pretty much any genre. So he can play rock, he can play blues, he can play jazz. And I picked up a couple of Tommy Bolin CDs, actually both live ones at Ebbertsfield. From 1974 and from 1976, and both of these are really, really good. So these have got Wild Dogs, which is a song that he did with Deep Purple, Marching Powder, which is very, very kind of fusiony, Lotus, Craze Fandango, which is marvellous. So really pleased to pick those two CDs up. They're both from the Tommy Bolin archives, which is really good. Tommy Bolin was obviously in Deep Purple alongside Glenn Hughes. I picked up a few Glenn Hughes things recently. I've just booked tickets to go and see him in Frome in Somerset in October. So I'm getting back into Glenn Hughes. Glenn Hughes is the self-proclaimed voice of rock. He got that name. He was called that on the What Time Is Love by KLF. He is the voice of rock on there, and he's got a wonderful voice actually. Sometimes in Deep Purple I think he oversang things, but he's got a beautiful voice. This is his debut album from 77. It was on Purple Records. This is a reissue from 2020, and it's got lots of extra tracks on it, including the Four on the Floor, I think. Yeah, Four on the Floor, which is kind of like a disco stuff that came out in Casablanca in the mid-70s, but very, very un-Deep Purple, quite soulful actually, quite interesting. This is a later album by him. I'm not sure when this one came out. This is probably a 2017 album, is it? No, earlier than that, 2005, but a 2017 reissues that Building the Machine. 12 songs on the original CD, including a Deep Purple track called Highball Shooter, which was on Stormbringer, and some live tracks as well. So that was a nice one. I've got another one by him in the mail actually, so looking forward to getting that. He also, Glenn Hughes has guested on a huge amount of albums actually, including a couple that involved Tony Iommi. Obviously he played with Tony Iommi in kind of Black Sabbath, as it had to be called, from the record company. And he played with one album with Tony Iommi, but he did some stuff with him on a couple of solo albums. One is called The Depth Sessions, which is good, and this one, which is called Fused. And this is really heavy. As you can imagine, the riffs on here from Tony Iommi are brutal. And, you know, if no one's in your house, really crank this up. Dopamine, Grace, really good. What You're Living For, fantastic guitar, brilliant vocals on that. So I'm really pleased to pick that up. It's a great album, actually. When's that? That's from 2005, so that's nice. He also played alongside a guy called John Norum. John Norum was a guitarist in Europe of Final Countdown fame. And Glenn sings on most of the tracks on Face the Truth. This is an album that came out in... when did this come out? I think this is an early 90s an early 90s recording, I think, but this is a reissue from 2020. The opening track, the title track, Face the Truth, is magnificent. If you like hard rock and you've not heard it, get on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you stream music, and play Face the Truth by John Norum. It is absolutely wonderful. There's also a song here called Steal the Night, which Glenn Hughes sings the vocals on. He did that song with a band called Phenomena, and it was also written for a proposed second album he was going to do with Pat Thrall, which never happened, but Still the Night is a great track. But the first track, Face the Truth, fantastic. Also picked up a 25th anniversary CD of Whitesnake's Slide It In. There has been a 35-year one, but I think this one is better. It's got the UK mix, the US mix, and then kind of like a DVD video with it as well. So pleased to pick that up. It divides opinion as to which one you like. Coming from the UK, I prefer the UK mix. I'm guessing most US people prefer the US one. Also picked up this is the Purple Tour by Whitesnake, a latter day Whitesnake album where Deep Purple songs were redone on an album called the Purple Album, and then he went on tour and played a lot of them. So this has got a CD with kind of Burn and The Gypsy, which is a great song, Mistreated, You'll Fool No One, Soldier of Fortune, alongside some of the kind of classic Whitesnake stuff, Still of the Night, Here I Go Again, Is This Love, Love Ain't No Stranger, all that kind of stuff. So not bad. His voice is nowhere near where it was in the old days, but an interesting sort of a relook at some of the classic Purple songs and some of the Whitesnake ones as well. So keeping on to the Deep Purple theme, just four more, a couple of Ian Gillan Band CDs as well. So this was during his kind of much more kind of almost jazz rocky kind of time, after when he left Purple and before he started the band Gillan. Colin Towns, who was in Gillan, appears on both of these actually, but yeah, some interesting, a couple of tracks on here that are, Woman from Tokyo, Smoke on the Water, Child in Time. They're on here as well. And it's a really different version of Child in Time, actually. If you've not heard it, it's actually really good. So that's the Rockfield Mixes, which is different kind of versions of stuff that found itself on the Clear Air Turbulence album. And there's a Live at the Rainbow as well. And the last two, a couple of Rainbow double CDs, deluxe ones. The first one is this one, Long Live Rock and Roll, which was the last album to feature Ronnie James Dio. This came out in 78. It's got two discs. The first disc has got the standard album on it, and then the second one is rough mixes. One or two of the songs are slightly better. I think Lady of the Lake is better as a rough mix, but it's also got some sort of concert stuff on it as well. So not bad at all. Deluxe version of Long Live Rock and Roll. And the other one is a deluxe version of the double album that came out in 78 or no 77 on Stage. This was my entry point to Rainbow, actually, or at least the single that came out at the same time as this, Kill the King. That was where I came into Rainbow, and I quickly bought Rainbow Rising after that. This is kind of much maligned as an album, actually, because it didn't include Stargazer or Light in the Black or some of the classic Tarot Woman, a full version of Starstruck. It didn't include those, and that was a bit disappointing, actually. And it has Mistreated and some kind of elongated songs, Still I'm Sad, on here. But it's got a second concert, Live at Osaka, as well, which is pretty good, actually. So it's really nice to add that one in. So there you go. There's a stack of CDs, some 45s and some albums. Tell me what you think in the comments below, and I'll get back to you sometime soon. Cheers all. Thanks.